Good afternoon. My name is Malcolm Graham, and I am the chairman of the City of Charlotte Housing Community Recovery Task Force, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our Thursday, April 30th meeting. The task force goals are simple. The task force was focused on three specific areas: mayor, transportation, the airport, and housing. And our goal with the housing task force is to do the following: to anticipate and plan for Charlotte post-recovery challenges, to listen to the community regarding the challenges people are facing, develop recommendations for how the city of Charlotte can pivot to support changes needed as a result of COVID-19, and provide a long-term vision for a healthy and stable economy and civic environment. This is our second meeting of the task force, and in your packages you received a copy of our work plan, which we'll be talking about later in our agenda. You also received the bios of our guests who will be providing public testimony, and we have a very good roster of speakers coming before the task force today. They include Mecklenburg County District Court Judge Kimberly Best, Special Deputy Attorney General with the North Carolina Department of Justice, Daniel Mosteller, Assistant County Manager with Mecklenburg County, Anthony Charlottenc, and also Judge Elizabeth Trosh will be joining us as well. So we have a full agenda. So without further ado, we'd like to get the roll call so we can know who's attending the meeting today for the viewing public. And again, my name is Malcolm Graham. I am the coordinator of the task force. If you can introduce yourself and tell us the organizations that you're representing, task force members. Starting with our city council members.
Braxton Winston, city council member at large.
Larkin Eggleston, city council member, District 1.
Renee Johnson, City Council Member, District 4. And today I'd like to honor those who lost their lives in the UNCC shooting, Riley Howell and Reed Parlier, and all of the students at UNCC. There will be a memorial this evening at 5:10 virtually, so if anyone is interested in participating, that will be online. Thank you.
And now our task force members, if you would introduce yourself.
Kathy Cummings with Bank of America.
Lee Cochran with Laurel Street.
Fred Dotson with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Housing Partnership.
Kim Graham with the Greater Charlotte Apartment Association.
Mr. Lindsay?
Yes, Anthony Lindsay, Caldwell Banker.
Ms. Metz?
Yes, this is Deronda Metz with the Salvation Army, representing the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Continuum of Care for Homeless.
This is Connie Staudinger. Good afternoon. Connie Staudinger. I'm with Horizon Development Properties, which is the development arm of Enlivian.
And if our city staff will introduce themselves.
Victoria Johnson, Assistant City Manager for the City of Charlotte.
Good afternoon, Pamela Weidman, Director of the City's Housing and Neighborhood Services Department.
I want to thank everyone for coming and being in attendance at today's meeting. Very important topics that we'll be talking about today, and we're going to start with our public testimonies. The goal and objective of the presentations this afternoon is to get a current status of evictions, including hotel and motel tenants, as well as get a report from Mecklenburg County in terms of what they're doing as relates to the COVID-19 and our homeless population. As I said earlier, we have 4 outstanding presenters today. We're going to adjust the order just a little bit and ask Mr. Troutman with Mecklenburg County If he would make his presentation first, and then we'll follow with Daniel and Josh Best following him. So I open the floor and welcome to the task force meeting Mecklenburg County Assistant Manager Anthony Charlton.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for inviting me to share information on what the county is doing to serve the homeless during COVID-19. Next slide. For this presentation, I will review the magnitude of homelessness in our community and the services and funding the county provided towards this issue before COVID-19, our initial and ongoing efforts during the outbreak of COVID-19 to help the homeless of our community, and our work to assist additional people who are homeless and at a higher risk of COVID-19. Next slide. The next slide. As everyone is well aware, homelessness was a significant social problem prior to COVID-19. We have a couple of ways we attempt to understand the severity of this complex issue in our community. We lead the annual point-in-time count survey, when a team of homeless service providers and volunteers come together one night in January to survey the number of people experiencing sheltered or unsheltered homelessness. The results from the 2020 survey will be released this fall, but the 2019 point-in-time count resulted in 1,742 people being counted as homeless. We also attempt to understand homelessness through the one number, which is highlighted on this slide. This is our best estimate of the total number of single adults, youth, veterans, the chronically homeless, and families who are homeless in the community. As of March 31st, 2020, this number is 3,683. And not everyone included in this number is on the streets or unsheltered. Many are in shelters and some are in transitional housing. The goal of the homeless services system is to help individuals exit from homelessness to permanent housing and then to sustain that housing. In FY18, over 2,100 individuals successfully exited to permanent housing. However, it's worth noting that despite the number of people moving into permanent housing, there continues to be a steady inflow of people entering homelessness in our community. More data and information about homelessness in our community can be found by going to our housing and homeless dashboard at mecklenburghousingdata.org. That's mecklenburghousingdata.org. Next slide. We offer direct services for the homeless or those at risk of becoming homeless through our departments of community support services and criminal justice services. The people we serve are of many different backgrounds and at various points along the housing and homelessness continuum. This includes people at risk of becoming homeless, children and families, the chronically homeless, individuals with mental health and substance use conditions, and people re-entering our community from the criminal justice system. I'll now provide a review of the key county programs that serve the homeless. We operate coordinated entry, a process that aims to divert people from becoming homeless or connect them with shelter or housing. This is a portal of entry for homeless services in the community. Residents in need of shelter or housing assistance should first call United Way's 211 Health and Human Services hotline and will then be referred for coordinated entry if appropriate. We have coordinated entry staff located at Urban Ministry Center, Men's Shelter, and Salvation Army. 5,156 in-person coordinated entry assessments were completed during FY19, an average of 430 per month. We have 10 county social work staff and 2 clinical supervisors that work at permanent supportive housing programs operated by the Urban Ministry Center Men's Shelter for people who were once chronically homeless. These programs serve approximately 200 individuals. Criminal Justice Services Housing Assistance for a Reentry program provides housing for people returning to our community after a period of incarceration. Most clients remain in the program between 7 and 12 months. Along with housing, the program's case managers assist with connecting clients to food, clothing, healthcare resources, as well as education and employment. The program has served 91 individuals so far in fiscal year 20, and the budget for this effort is approximately $160,000. We also manage our community's Continuum of Care Governance Committee as defined by HUD. HUD awards $4.7 million to our community through a competitive collaborative application process. Current recipients include both the county and nonprofit agencies. These funds support the county's Shelter Plus Care program, a program that links people who are chronically homeless with affordable housing and supportive services. Shelter Plus Care currently serves approximately 240 households. Community nonprofits currently receiving these funds include Community Link, Urban Ministry Centers Men's Shelter, Salvation Army, and Supportive Housing Communities. These funds help them provide housing subsidy for permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing programs. Next slide. We also fund additional services provided by our partner agencies. These services include homeless diversion, emergency shelter, legal advocacy, housing placement, and case management. The partner agencies we fund are highlighted on this slide, and we provide over $5.6 million to support these agencies. Through our rental subsidy fund, we provided an additional $5.7 million to the Foundation for the Carolinas Away Home Housing Endowment to create MEC Home. The program provides rapid rehousing, rental subsidy, and supportive services to families, youth, and individuals who are homeless and earn less than 30% AMI. So far, 19 households, a total of 57 people, have moved into housing through the MEC Home program, which kicked off in February. We also provided approximately $1.7 million from the Rental Subsidy Fund to the Men's Shelter and Urban Ministry Center for Link Housing, a program designed to house long-term shelter guests at the men's shelter. 7 people have moved into housing with the Link program so far. So between our county programs and our funding for nonprofit agencies, we invested over $20 million in homeless-related services during FY20 prior to COVID-19. Next slide. Next slide. As the COVID-19 crisis unfolded in our community, Mecklenburg County began coordinating a weekly call with community providers who serve the homeless to ensure a comprehensive response. Our discussion centered on how we could all work together to maximize our current resources to help the homeless during COVID-19. We requested that the agencies prepare a continuity of operations plan and identify additional activities to slow the spread of COVID, such as hand washing, education, and ordering additional cleaning supplies. Next slide. Working with the United Way Foundation of Carolinas and the City of Charlotte, the Board of Commissioners helped establish the COVID-19 Response Fund in the wake of the crisis. Over $16 million has been raised for the fund so far, with donations coming from many businesses, churches, and individual donors. The county contributed $1.3 million to the fund, much of which goes to homeless-related services. Next slide. From the beginning of the COVID outbreak, the Men's Shelter, Salvation Army, and Safe Alliance were involved in helping us coordinate our sheltering response. Because of the need for social distancing, the Men's Shelter and Salvation Army were unable to offer the 100 overflow beds they normally provide. To address this reduction in community shelter capacity, we've been working closely with the Men's Shelter and Salvation Army and Safe Alliance. And so far, the county has rented over 300 hotel rooms for shelter guests to be able to practice social distancing and isolation and quarantine. has helped make the shelters and their guests safer by reducing overcrowding. The county provides food and laundry services at the hotels, and we also provide security. Our budget amount for these hotels thus far is approximately $1.4 million and will continue to grow as the crisis continues. This is in addition to the $20 million that we were already providing. When a shelter guest tested positive for COVID-19, they were quickly placed in a quarantine and isolation hotel, as were other shelter guests who had been exposed to the individual that tested positive. The ELC coordinated transportation to the hotels for all of the affected shelter guests. And one of the task force members, Deronda Metz, and I were on the phone until 12:30 that evening, working through the issues to make sure that all of the shelter guests were safe and in an appropriate place. So, along with the efforts of the county and the $1.3 million, many of you on City Council voted to support funding 120 rooms for homeless individuals and families at the Men's Shelter and Salvation Army for update months. This will create additional capacity at both of these shelters for the unsheltered. Next slide. On March 16th, the North Carolina Chief Justice Terry Beasley issued a court order delaying civil court proceedings, including evictions, and another order allowing sheriffs to delay performing evictions on previously issued eviction orders. He recently extended these orders to June 1st. The North Carolina Attorney General's office issued a letter to almost 100 hotels in Charlotte to halt evictions in accordance with Judge Beasley's order. The president of the Greater Charlotte Hospitality and Tourism Alliance issued a statement asking his group members to halt their hotel evictions as well. And the county's contracted partnership with legal aid continues to be a resource through this crisis. Legal aid has assisted with eviction prevention for clients at 100 different hotels during the last 3 weeks alone. The county is leading an effort with many nonprofit agencies to help people at risk of hotel evictions as well by connecting them with funding to pay their hotel bills or housing related costs. Social Serve is partnering with the county on this project to administer funds from the COVID-19 Relief Fund for eligible hotel guests. And the county social work staff will also assist with providing access to other available community resources. And on Monday, April 20th, I was contacted by Task Force member Councilman Eagleson about the Days Inn on Woodlawn that was closing down that next day. There were 14 families remaining at the hotel and the power and water was shut off. We contacted legal aid and activated our coordinated entry social work team to assess the hotel guests. Legal aid informed the hotel that they would file an injunction to have the power and water turned back on, but the corporate office addressed the problem without an injunction. There's still uncertainty about what will happen at this property, but the county continues to work with remaining guests to offer resources as available and appropriate. And legal aid continues to be a resource for guests as well. But this may not be an isolated issue, so we are developing a longer-term strategy for how to work with hotel guests should a similar situation arise. Next slide. We're also partnering with our hospital systems to provide further assistance and protective measures for the homeless in our community. The ELC has representatives from both Atrium and Novant. They continue to provide medical advice and will ensure testing protocols are in place for the sheltered and unsheltered homeless. Also, Novant has obtained a large inventory of face masks. They're developing a plan to distribute these to our shelter partners for both the shelter guests and the unsheltered homeless. Next slide. We've been asked to provide transportation for COVID-19 testing for homeless and vulnerable residents in our community who are asymptomatic. And we're working with our current transportation vendors to provide this service. Next slide. There's also work being done to assist people who are unsheltered and in homeless encampments throughout the county. CDC guidelines for the unsheltered homeless include not clearing encampments during COVID-19 because this increases the potential for spread of the disease. Encouraging people staying in encampments to set up their tents or sleeping quarters with at least 12 feet by 12 feet of distance. If toilets or hand washing facilities are unavailable nearby, to provide access to porta-johns, hand washing facilities for encampments of more than 10 people, and to plan for where individuals and families with suspected or confirmed COVID-19 can stay safely, including places where people can be isolated. And we've been working with our homeless service partner agencies to respond to each of these guidelines. Next slide. Next slide. We've had several conference calls with the Greater Charlotte Rise Advocacy Group to discuss our concerns regarding the unsheltered population. We've shared our current efforts to help the homeless during COVID-19. Well, their initial proposal was larger than the COVID-19 effort, was focused instead on responding to the broader unsheltered issue in our community. McMahon then issued a letter to the ELC, City Council, and the Board of Commissioners on April 9th requesting further action for the unsheltered population during COVID-19 as well. Next slide. We reviewed the concerns outlined in McMahon's letter and responded with the following details. Law enforcement will not seek to break up or disturb existing tent encampments unless the encampment is on private property and a request is made from the property owner to law enforcement. We are collaborating with the Urban Ministry Center Men's Shelter to identify homeless encampments in need of porta-johns and hand washing stations. As of now, 11 locations have been identified. 2 of these locations that are in areas frequented by the homeless will have 2 porta-johns. Urban Ministry Center will manage these facilities with funding provided by the county. Shower services have come up as a concern as well. The mobile shower van is no longer operating in our community, but showers are available at Urban Ministry Center's College Street location 7 days a week, which the unsheltered are familiar with. Hotel evictions were another item included in the letter, for which I shared our response earlier in this presentation. Next slide. McMahon's letter also requested an additional 100 to 120 hotel rooms for people who are unsheltered and living with one of the CDC's high risk factors for severe disease. We're now working with Urban Ministry Center Men's Shelter to finalize our approach to this issue. Current plan is as follows. The county will provide a 70-room hotel that will be staffed 24 hours a day by the Urban Ministry Center with support from the Salvation Army and supportive housing communities. The hotel will serve both sheltered guests and unsheltered individuals who are at higher risk of COVID-19. In addition to the hotel, the county will provide security and a food vendor. McMahon will provide the volunteer coordination and meal delivery. Next slide. Next slide. So in summary, we've continued to operate our homeless services programs and provide significant funding to our partner agencies, over $20 million prior to COVID-19. As COVID-19 began to affect our community, we convened homeless service providers to ensure the most comprehensive response possible. And we have weekly calls with all of our shelter partners. We're currently operating over 300 hotel rooms for social distancing and isolation and quarantine to help the homeless. We're working with our homeless service partners to finalize an approach for serving the homeless who are at higher risk of COVID-19 in a 70-room hotel provided by the county. And this concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions or concerns you may have.
Anthony, thank you very much for that very comprehensive presentation. I want to thank you and the Mecklenburg Board of County Commissioners and your colleague for the work that you do to help our most vulnerable population, which is the homeless. As you can see from the presentation, Mecklenburg County takes the lead in serving and working with the homeless population in our community, simply because they also house the supportive services necessary to support that effort. So they are the lead agency, government organization that's impacting the homelessness issue in our community. Our role as a city is to play a supportive role with the county. Examples of that supportive role would be, for an example, this past Monday, we approved 194 shelter beds for the men's shelter on Statesville Avenue as a part of our Housing Trust Fund allocation. In addition, every year, the federal emergency grant allocation is dedicated to helping the homelessness issue in our community. And as Anthony said earlier, the city provided funding for 120 beds to help with COVID-19. So we play a supportive role. I do not see that that changing in the short and or the long term, simply because of the supportive service issue that the county house under their jurisdiction. So I think that kind of sets the table for us regarding the homelessness issue. I'll ask the first question, and task force members, be mindful that there's 3 other presentations to come. So just be mindful of that. My first question to Anthony is there a transition plan to get people out of the hotels once we get down the road post COVID-19? What's that transitional plan look like, and how does the supportive services work to accomplish that goal?
We have not finalized the transition plan because we're looking to have an overall transition plan based on the governor's orders. And so now that the governor has issued a phased-in approach, we're developing a transition plan right now. We've been having conversations with our shelter partners because many of the folks that have gone into the shelters, the hotels have come from the shelters to allow for social distancing. And this new population with the unsheltered, we are finalizing that plan now with the Urban Ministry Center.
Thank you, Anthony. Are there any questions for Anthony before he leaves?
Mr. Winston has a question.
Mr. Winston.
Thank you. Not so much questions, but comments of what I would like to see this task force tackle along with the county. I think we need an action plan for our growing tent city that is situated on North College Street behind Urban Ministries. I do recognize that homelessness is an issue that affects every county, every district in our county and our city. But of course, North College is the centralized location, and we need to deal with that. So I would love if we can collaborate with the county to come up with a 30-day action plan on that. In terms of the hotels and motels, we need a plan that gets away from these direct payments. We need to make clear that government will not be able to replace all lost revenue as business models try to deal with this. So that's what we're dealing with down.
This question is for Anthony. Anthony, why are guests being evicted from the hotels?
Well, guests were being evicted from the hotels for non-payment. But since the Chief Justice letter and order came out, they should not be evicted from those hotels. But legal aid is taking, up those issues on a case-by-case basis. If an individual called an hotel their residence, they are protected under the law to not be evicted during this period.
So you mentioned hundreds of hotel evictions. So are there hundreds of hotel rooms that are not being paid for?
I'm not sure on how many hotel rooms are not being paid for. I do know that our legal aid team is accepting a ton of phone calls from individuals, and we've activated our coordinated entry social work team to work with those folks in the hotels, help them plan for a transition out of the hotels, or help them with any resources that they need during this period.
Okay. Initially, through the COVID-19 fund, was there a plan to help individuals who were currently in hotels to shelter in place?
Yes, there was a press release that we sent out several weeks ago that stated the COVID-19 fund would be used with Crisis Assistance Ministry to assist those individuals that lost their job as it relates to COVID and were staying in those motels, and they would help those individuals pay those hotel bills. That was before Chief Justice Beasley's order. And since then, we have been working with them still. We've transitioned from Crisis Assistance Ministry to Social Serve to help pay some of those hotel bills. But also, we're doing more than just paying the hotel bills. We're using our social work team to help them plan for a transition.
So should the hotels,
yeah.
so should the hotels now contact Social Serve for outstanding balances, or is that still being paid through the COVID-19 fund?
So we're working with the hotel guests. We're not working with those businesses. And as I stated in the presentation, we're asking guests to call the 211 hotline, and we'll begin to plan for those guests. As far as the businesses, there's not a statewide plan that accompanied Chief Justice Beasley's order to work with the businesses.
Okay, and then my last question, the Chief Justice order protects individuals who consider the hotel their permanent residence, right? That's why they were protected?
That's correct.
So are those individuals considered homeless?
I would say no. I mean, if you call the hotel your residence, that's your residence. As far as other individuals that went into hotels, I mean, it really is a case-by-case basis. And I don't have an inventory of who's in those hotels currently.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
Mr. Lindsay has a question.
Mr. Lindsay.
Well, he actually, Anthony just answered my question. It was about, do we have any mechanism in place to estimate or gauge how the homeless population may grow as a result of employment loss and other housing impacts after COVID-19?
Okay. Any additional questions? So a lot of the questions.
One more question, Councilmember Graham.
And the hotels will be answered by next two speakers from a state perspective in terms of kind of laying out what the laws are and what's happening right here on the ground in Mecklenburg County. And so I think, Mr. Winston, you have a question?
Yes, I do. One of the issues with the homeless population that we're trying to solve right now from a city perspective is the CATS situation. We have a number of homeless individuals that are riding public transportation through the day. But one of the issues is that, there are workers and everybody on it. Those homeless individuals do not have access to the PPE that is necessary to help reduce the community spread. Is there any plan to distribute PPE to our homeless population on a daily basis? And if not, can we come up with one?
So many of the shelters have some limited PPE now, but earlier in the presentation, I talked about Novat purchasing a large order of masks. I believe they're going to purchase 1 million masks, and they plan to mask the entire community. And one of the priority populations are the homeless shelters and the unsheltered. So they should be contacting shelter partners to give them those masks and other support items.
I hear that. I would love to see specifically along the blue line and on our catch transportation, if we can focus on that, because it is our healthy frontline workers that are utilizing that, and we have to obviously keep everybody healthy, but as we reduce the literal viral effect of this issue, I think we should really look at that.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, for your presentation. And again, thank you for the work that Mecklenburg County is doing. Let me reiterate one more time. Mecklenburg County is the lead agency relating to homelessness in our community. Our role as a task force and the city council is to be in a supportive position. And so we stand ready to support what Mecklenburg County is doing to eradicate homelessness in our community. Our next presentation is from Daniel Mosteller, who is the Special Deputy Attorney General with the North Carolina Department of Justice. Daniel, as well as Judge Bess and Judge Trosh, will be speaking to the current status of evictions, hotel, motel tenants, etc., so they can kind of really give us a broad perspective. And if we can allow the speakers to speak, and then we ask our questions after all three have made their presentation, because again, they'll all be along the same lines in terms of questioning when we have questions. So we'll start with the Attorney General, Special Deputy, then we'll follow with Judge Bess, and then Judge Trosh. Welcome, Daniel.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting the Attorney General's office to participate in today's important hearing. As was included in the packets that went out as part of this meeting, what I included in that packet was the press release that Attorney General Stein issued on Friday, April 3rd, concerning the hotel eviction issue, along with a sample of the letter that we sent out to many hotels in Charlotte on that day, sent out by mail. And then I've also included 2 follow-up communications that we sent to the North Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association based on questions that they have raised concerning our original letter. So let me give a little bit of background to why we sent it out, a sort of high-level overview of the contents of those letters, and then just a few observations. So as background to this, it came to our attention both through contacts from legal aid in Charlotte and from contacts from United Way 211 to the Department of Health and Human Services in Raleigh, that had become a significant issue on hotel evictions shortly after the stay-at-home orders were issued. And so the letters that we put out, and if for folks that have closely read it, to be clear, all we were doing was saying what the law in North Carolina has been since the early 1990s. We were not creating new law or interpreting it in some new way. It has been the law since the Baker v. Rushing case out of the Court of Appeals in 1991 that it is clear that in appropriate circumstances, the North Carolina landlord-tenant laws apply to hotels and motels. And as stated in our April 3rd letter, it is a very fact-intensive and and resident by resident intensive question of whether people have established and are using their hotels as primary residencies. But that has been the law since 1991. Now, and as Mr. Troutman sort of explained, the issue that's arisen now is and typically, so the one key issue about North Carolina's landlord-tenant law is that in order to remove someone either physically or constructively from a property, one has to go to court and get an order from the magistrate and have it served by the sheriff. You cannot, it is a violation of North Carolina's landlord-tenant law to what's typically called self-help eviction is not allowed. You cannot sort of force someone out if you don't have the court order and don't have the sheriff execute the court order. Now, with Chief Justice Beasley's order that the courts cease sort of regular operations through June 1st, that means for evictions that had not occurred before that order was entered, there aren't proceedings right now to allow for eviction. So there is effectively a moratorium of evictions through the landlord-tenant laws right now. So that contrast with under normal sort of, if we're talking about a normal hotel guest that's just there on business travel or vacation or whatnot, there are not protections under North Carolina sort of hotel laws about removal. It really is just a matter where if someone's overstaying their terms there, the hotel will typically call the local police to seek trespassing, seek their arrest for trespassing. But that's not allowed under the landlord-tenant laws. So we've gotten a lot of questions and feedback and from hotel owners and from the associations since then. I'll say the vast majority of hotel owners that have contacted us are very understanding of the issue and are not looking to put people out on the street and understand the sort of the unprecedented situation we're in, and that's similar for all the associations that have contacted us. There's a lot of interest in doing the right thing and a lot of goodwill out there, and certainly the Attorney General's office appreciates that. I think there is some genuine confusion among some in the hotel industry. I'll say one, and this was addressed in our April 7th letter. There was some confusion because for sales tax purposes in North Carolina, there is a sort of hard and fast 90-day rule on how long a hotel has to collect sort of the typical sales tax on a hotel guest versus after 90 days, it is considered for sales tax purposes, a residence where that sales tax no longer needs to be collected, just as a typical apartment owner doesn't have to collect sales tax on apartments. So that created and that still is creating confusion. There are a lot of hotel owners who and understandably so, given the complicated nature of the law and that this sort of eviction issue doesn't typically come up, believe that there was sort of a hard and fast 90-day rule. And our April 7th letter makes it clear that that is not the law of North Carolina under the landlord-tenant law. Again, the Baker v. Rushing case did not sort of create any bright line rules on when someone becomes sort of there as their primary residence for purposes of eviction. So that's one area of I think genuine confusion that I think we've been somewhat successful in clarifying, but we still are hearing from hotel owners who are confused about that or telling us, oh no, we don't have to go to and get an eviction order because they haven't been there for 90 days. And similarly, we've heard a lot of confusion or wish by the hotel industry that there was a bright line rule. I mean, I think a lot of people are seeking clarity in this, and unfortunately, as I said, again, we're just sort of saying the law as the Court of Appeals has laid it out. We don't have the power to create a bright line rule, and there just isn't a bright line rule under how our courts have interpreted the landlord-tenant law. So I completely understand the frustration of the hotel industry about that, but that is what the law is at the current moment. So we can't really provide any further clarity on that, given the law isn't clear. I will note in our April 16th letter, we did observe that it is highly unlikely that something as short as a 1 or 2 night stay at a hotel would establish primary residence. We were hearing a lot of concerns that I think were based on maybe a very few anecdotal sort of instances that were sort of spreading through the grapevine, where allegedly people were sort of moving in, paying for 1 day, and then saying, now you have to evict me, I'm not leaving. I don't know how many, if any, circumstances of that occurred. I don't know where, and if they did, I don't know where in the state they occurred. But we heard that concern and a lot of angst about that among hotel owners, and so I think we laid it out that kind of extremely short stay is unlikely to raise sort of to the level of primary residence. And again, just to be clear, the issue, it is not that and the letters in April 16th make this very clear, although I think it was clear in the original letter. It does not excuse payment for the rooms. It does not mean that hotels can't ask for payment, can't continue to bill customers. This is really just a question about physically removing them from the property or doing things that constitute constructive eviction under the law. So, like what we heard with the Woodlawn Days Inn, shutting off the water, shutting off the power, rekeying the room, or something to that extreme. But again, just asking people to pay is unlikely to be constructive eviction and is not prohibited by the landlord-tenant laws. So it really is just that question that actually getting someone removed from the property does require going to court, and at the current moment, given the Chief Justice's order, is not allowable. And we've continued to receive complaints about the issue. I think the volume of complaints has started to go down. I think there's growing understanding about the issue across the state, and honestly, I think it's also probably a number of hotels have gotten legal advice about the issue now. And we continue to get complaints, and we continue to send out additional letters, and I've also been in touch with Legal Aid in Charlotte and continue to interface with them on the issue. I will say it is an issue ultimately where tenants that are facing this situation need to obtain individualized legal counsel, which is almost certainly going to come through Legal Aid or some other kind of pro bono arrangement, because it is such a fact-specific inquiry, and the law is sort of so fact-specific. Just from sort of it may be that, I mean, it obviously is that some people staying in hotels are not covered by the landlord-tenant law, and a hotel may be able to make a fair legal assessment that specific individuals in specific cases are not covered by the landlord-tenant laws and therefore can be removed without going to court. So it is the kind of situation where individualized sort of legal counsel on both sides is ultimately necessary to sort of look through the facts and circumstances and determine what, I mean, and obviously since the courts are largely shut down right now, there's also not the option of going to court and getting further clarification on how the magistrates and how the district court and ultimately Superior Court bench in Mecklenburg County would interpret the law. So everyone's sort of having to do their best assessment based on not a whole lot of law out there on this question. But as I said at the beginning, I think a lot of people are making good faith efforts. The vast majority of hotel owners that we hear from are trying to do the right thing. But we are still getting complaints and certainly our sort of first answer to everyone is try to get in touch with legal aid and get that kind of individualized legal assistance that's ultimately going to be necessary to sort of to get to find the legal answer. And then obviously the other issue, which I know some of the committee members have already sort of alluded to, is what happens once the Chief Justice's order expires and the courts reopen, and people are going to then face eviction and going to also have significant overdue bills that they do. I mean, that is a valid debt that they have, and that's going to be something that obviously will have to be dealt with after the fact. So I think that covers, and as I said, we put all the three letters that we now sent into the packet along with the press release, and would encourage people to review those letters on all sides.
Thank you, Daniel, and that's a very good pivot point for my good friend Judge Best in terms of what happens when the court opens. What's happening on the ground in Mecklenburg County, and just kind of share with the task force, Kim, as well as Elizabeth, the state of affairs here in Mecklenburg County with our court system, and what you envision how that's going to operate once these orders are lifted. And I turn the floor over to Judge Best.
All right, thank you very much for having me on this call. I've been serving as district court judge as well as our chief, Judge Elizabeth Trosh, since January 1st, 2009, and currently I lead our Civil Courts Committee. Our Civil Courts Committee, as you all well know, which is why I'm on the call, we handle our landlord-tenant matters as well as civil matters involving monies between $10,000 and $25,000, as well as, which includes some debt collection matters, as well as commercial evictions, as well as residential evictions, which legally we call them summary ejectments. The summary ejectments are initiated with a filing of a complaint, but the first thing is that the landlord has to send that demand notice, and they can only do that under the law by the 16th day of each month. If it's a year-long lease, they have to give a 1-month notice, 7 days notice if it's a month-to-month lease, and a 2-day notice if it's a week-to-week lease. After that, the landlord can then file the complaint. That is served. The hearing, eviction hearing or summary ejectment hearing is scheduled within 14 days usually. Usually it's a lot quicker here in Mecklenburg County, usually within about approximately 7 days. The first hearing is before the magistrate. So I'm going to provide two separate numbers. I'm going to provide the number of filings with the magistrate prior to the shelter in place order by the governor, and then I'll provide the numbers for the district court, because if the tenant or the landlord is not happy with the magistrate's decision, then they have 10 days to appeal that matter, and then it goes before a district court judge, myself, or one of my other colleagues, and that is a trial de novo. And what that means is that they get a new trial without regards to what happened in the underlying case with the magistrate. So at this point in Mecklenburg County, prior to or March 16th, as of March 16th, there were approximately 300 summary ejectments. I'll use the word appeals. Evictions. 300 evictions pending to go before a magistrate. Half of those were dismissed later in the month, towards the end of March, middle of April. So there are still 150 Mecklenburg County summary ejectments that need to go before the magistrates, and they are that first step in the process for removing a tenant from the residence. Since the stay-at-home order by the governor, there have been approximately 200 new filings. And that approximation, and once again, these are the matters that will go before the magistrate, that estimation is not a definite estimation. It is an estimation that we should have numbers for after all of the data entry is completed. Currently, our clerk's office, our court system, they are accepting filings for evictions, but once again, nothing is happening. Our court system currently for evictions, we are not proceeding, we are not hearing those matters, we are not issuing orders. And that goes back to not only the governor's order, but also the Chief Justice order as well, halting those processes and noting that it is not considered an essential court. We are only operating essential courts at this point, and Judge Trosh may be able to speak on that just a little bit later, what those courts are if needed. Now, after, of course, someone appeals that trial de novo to the district court, as of March 16th, and these are our backlogged cases, we had approximately 133 summary ejectments or evictions pending when the stay-at-home order and the Chief Justice order was implemented. So currently right now you have approximately 350 cases at the magistrate's level, and you have 133 cases before a district court judge, and those are the appeals. So in other words, someone was forced or the magistrate found that those individuals, the tenants, that they were not to be removed from the property, or the landlords appealed the magistrate's decision saying that the tenants could remain in the property. So right now, those are the numbers. So that's approximately 483 cases. Now, keeping in mind, and we have been in discussions, and prior to this meeting, the Civil Courts Committee did have a meeting, and we did discuss what those ideas are going, or what the court system or our process will look like, and what our dockets will look like once the stay-at-home order will be implemented. And speaking with our clerk, Elisa Chingari, we have already, and she's in discussions with, of course, our chief district court judge, as well as other key officials that operate the courthouse. Once we resume normal operations, our normal operations will not be so normal. We will still be implementing and utilizing safety measures recommended by the Centers for Disease Control. So in other words, we will still not have packed courtrooms. We will still be, instead of placing 50 cases per day on a courtroom docket, it may look as though we have 25 cases, and we will be implementing as many strategies as necessary. We have not finalized all those details, but the discussions have been had. And what we have realized is that when we have those individuals, those matters come back before us and we resume court, we will have to determine how many cases, and our clerk of court, as well as our chief district court, will have those discussions, as well as the Civil Courts Committee, how many cases should be put on in each day. There's already a published calendar for June 1st, for example, because we know we'll resume June 1st. And right now, all 133 of those backlog cases are on that docket, but that does not mean that we will hold or hear all of those matters during that week. We expect continuances from some of our landlords and or our tenants, or requests for continuances, and we will not be able to handle that volume, taking into consideration the safety measures that we will have to put in place. We are currently considering, however, how we are going to handle our summary ejectments, and right now we are considering, with input from our chief district court judge and our clerk's office, whether or not we are going to hold some hearings remotely. The state has provided us with WebEx, and I apologize, I could not sign on. I anticipated being able to sign on, but we all have WebEx so that we can have confidential hearings via WebEx. The attorneys, they have conference rooms, and they have the capabilities so that we can hold some of these hearings, whether it's by motion or whether it's an actual hearing, remotely. The jury trials, however, those will be on the back burner, and for the most part, when we're talking about evictions, we are not talking about jury trials. We're talking about hearings where we anticipate no more than 10 people would actually be in the actual courtroom. But nonetheless, we're still discussing whether or not those hearings will be remotely. We are also discussing how we're going to schedule the backlog of hearings, and then what we're going to do with our hearings moving forward. The fact that we will not have our jury hearings will allow us or give us more days to actually handle the summary ejectment or eviction cases, but that schedule has not been finalized. For example, the 133 cases, if we're able to hold court 4 days per week, just in the week of June 1st, that means we will have to handle approximately 33 cases per day. So how would those 33 cases be broken up? Will we have, 15 or 16 and 17 in the morning, and 16 in the afternoon? We're not sure as of yet, and we'll be having those continued discussions. One of the things that we need to figure out, number one, and people we need to get to the table, and I heard that that one of our panelists, Ms. Graham, is working for the Apartment Association. So they will be invited to our team meetings. We will be inviting Crisis Assistance Ministry to our team meeting, to our next meeting. We'll hope to invite the Greater Charlotte Apartment Association to that meeting as well. We have firms that represent landlords, legal aid, of course. They are part of our committee already, and the Creditors Bar will be speaking with them as well. But also, of course, our magistrates, our clerk's office, as well as our trial court administrator's office will be involved in that meeting. But one important person or one important aspect of that is that all of these individuals, even with the backlogged cases, they have to be renoticed. In other words, they have to be served and given at least 30 days notice to tell them when their eviction or summary ejectment hearing would take place in district court. So we have to have individuals from the sheriff's office present before we can finalize what exactly our calendars will look like. So they will also be invited to the table for their input. So I'm saying all of that to say that we will definitely be having the discussions moving forward, but as of right now, where we are with the number of evictions that have been filed or that are backlogged, in Mecklenburg County, we have 350 total at the magistrate level, 133 at the district court level. And then we anticipate we have approximately 200 new filings since the stay-at-home order has been and the Chief Justice order has been put into place. So we were talking about potentially 683 cases. We have also had discussions, and we will be discussing whether or not we are going to extend court hours, because not only do we have to be concerned about our caseload and the CDC recommended safety precautions, we also have to be concerned about clerk and court staff not being overextended. We all anticipate and expect that once we return to a somewhat normal, which I don't believe there is a normal at this point, a somewhat normal court schedule, that we will be working longer hours and more days. But what that will look like, we are not quite sure of yet, and we will be having those discussions, which will involve all of those parties that I actually just named. And so right now, I know people are antsy. They're curious to know what they should do. But that is where we are in Mecklenburg County, and I just want to further expand on what the Deputy Attorney General stated. When we talk about specifically hotels and motels, what the law specifically says, and that's General Statute 42-40, subsection 2, is that it specifically, that section talks about summary ejectment, and it specifically excludes what is considered transient occupancy in a hotel, motel, or similar lodging subject to regulations by the Commission for Health Services. So when we talk about specifically hotels and motels, extended stay hotels, the smaller hotels where people tend to reside, is not a hard, fast rule as he stated. What the case that he mentioned states, Baker v. Rushing, which is outlined in the Attorney General's letter, and what Baker v. Rushing said, and is still considered good law, is that there is no inherent determination that because that is where you're staying at a hotel or motel, that is considered your residence. It has has to be, whether someone is a tenant has to be determined by looking at all of the circumstances, and the fact that the building is identified as a hotel or motel and those who reside in it as guests, that's not determinative. So it is actually a case-by-case basis. So each judge would take a look at and determine whether or not, how long had you been staying at the hotel? Had you been receiving mail there? Do you receive mail anyplace else? You know, is this address listed on your children's school application? What is the circumstances overall of that particular hotel? Do they come in and provide cleaning services each and every day? Do you pay utilities? Are there separate utilities? There's a lot of different factors that go into a judge ultimately making the determination that, yes, this person's staying at the extended stay or the stay in, you know, or the days in, whether or not you are actually a tenant, and whether or not the hotel had the ability, needed to file an eviction, or whether or not they could call the police to simply arrest you and charge you with trespassing. So there's a lot that goes into it. As the Deputy Attorney General stated, it's not clear cut. I will say that in my 12 years on the bench, those cases do not come up that often. I think since I've only had maybe two or three of those cases, and those were cases where the individuals had been staying at this particular hotel for approximately 10 months. Okay, so I'm here if there are any additional questions that you all have for me.
Thank you, Judge Bess, for that presentation. Thank you, Daniel. Judge Trost, do you want to add anything to that, or can we just open up for questions and answers?
I don't have a whole lot to add. I think Judge Bess did a really great job of just kind of going over what the process is and obtaining, you know, some of the numbers of the backlog. I think overall, you know, the takeaway is that June 1st, we expect that we will resume our normal sort of court business. So will no longer be restricted to just sort of the necessary emergency kinds of proceedings or proceedings where significant due process rights are at stake. But we're not going to be able to have normal operations. We continue to receive guidance on what it will take to have live hearings and to, you know, handle court business in a manner that maintains the safety of our staff, our court personnel, and members of the public. I think that Judge Bess' invitation to members of this task force, including, you know, folks who can kind of represent both the interests of property owners and tenants, is something that, you know, I would echo because I think we're going to have to be really creative about how we're dealing with this backlog. Historically, we've had mediation practices to try to resolve pending eviction cases. Those have largely been implemented once the case has been appealed and is scheduled in district court. But we might want to think about whether there are strategies that we can implement and work, frankly, together to implement to try to resolve, you know, understanding that the dynamics of some of these cases in this moment are not the same as the traditional sort of landlord-tenant summary ejectment proceeding. And so I really urge those of you who can bring some of those perspectives into this discussion to join the next Civil Courts Committee meeting as we think about planning for reopening and trying to identify all the different kinds of things we could do differently to bring about a resolution to this backlog of cases. And I would just also say that, you know, this also means that there are people who have been able to, you know, maintain some housing stability over the period that the Chief Justice's order has been in effect. And they're likely to have, you know, we're likely to have a large number of folks whose housing situation becomes much more tenuous once these eviction proceedings are moving forward.
Judge Crunk, thank you very much for your presentation, your participation. Judge Best, Daniel, thank you again. A lot of good information. I think it was really important that we, again, kind of frame the issue moving forward, direct people in terms of where the authority lies, like in terms of some of these issues, i.e., homelessness, Mecklenburg County, issues in terms of evictions, et cetera, the judicial system itself here in Mecklenburg County. And so, again, the information is for the task force members as well as the general public as we begin to look at what happens when the court reopens here throughout the state and specifically here in Mecklenburg County. And so I will open up the floor to questions from the members. And I would hope that we can really hear from our external members first. There are a lot of voices around the table. Rhonda, for example, with the women's shelter, and Kim with the apartment association and others, that I really would like to hear their voices on these particular issues. So I will open up the floor for questions.
Mr. Lindsay has a question.
Mr. Lindsay.
Question about whether or not we have any local authority to institute practices that further strengthen the existing law around protecting tenants in place. And what I'm really asking is, I know that the courts are going to follow the statute and they have that responsibility, but does the city have any sort of legal authority to in any way impose any rules around how that process unfolds? And I don't know whether or not Daniel can answer that question or either of the judges can answer that question, but it's just to raise the point of whether or not there's any latitude locally within the city to affect this process.
Any of the panelists can weigh in. Judge Bess, Daniel, anyone can weigh in?
I think Daniel is probably more appropriate to answer that question too, because we have to follow state law. But there's also an ability as far as an ability for city and counties to, of course, implement ordinances. But I believe that with regards to summary ejectment and landlord-tenant matters, I do not believe there's authority, but I am not going to absolutely say that there isn't. So I think the Attorney General's office may have more experience with that, but I'm not aware of any authority.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and this is not an area that I regularly practice in as far as sort of local, the ability of local governments and that authority. I will say, I don't believe there is anything in the landlord-tenant statutes that would on its own authorize it. I believe, and I don't have the citation right off the top of my head, there is a provision, I think explicitly, there is an explicit provision preventing cities and counties from entering rent control statutes under the landlord-tenant law. That's General Statute 42-14.1 explicitly bans rent control. I don't hear what so that would be one statute I'd look to. I don't think there's anything explicit otherwise in the landlord-tenant laws statutes. And again, this is a somewhat different issue. I know city and county building codes can be grounds for sort of issues about habitability under the landlord-tenant law. So there is some room for cities and counties to pass sort of minimum housing standards, but that again probably is not particularly relevant to this issue.
Next question.
Ms. Kim Graham has a question.
Kim Graham.
Thank you. I was trying to unmute myself and it wasn't working. So I first want to thank the judges that are on with us today, and I appreciate the Herculean task that you all will have once the courts reopen in trying to figure out how to process through all of the cases and working under this new normal. I do wonder if there's any way for us to make notations as for kind of along the same lines as Mr. Lindsay, for tenants who are not on a good end of a legal proceeding. So if they have a judgment passed against them, I wonder if there's a way to notate if that goes, passes on to their credit reports or anything, if there's a way to notate whether it's COVID-19. I mean, we're in a time where people are paying mortgages, maybe paying late, just things are hitting people's credit, and an eviction is already just a really tough thing to get past on your credit. I just wonder if there's any way to, and this may be beyond us, beyond our jurisdiction and municipality, but some way to notate COVID-19 as a blip so that this doesn't cripple them forever with their credit and renting again. I think about this, and it really does scare me as to what this looks like for renters in the future.
Hi, this is Judge Best. I do not know that we're able to influence that. My understanding, and I was on a call on a webinar for credit yesterday. My organization sponsored that webinar. I do know that that would be something at the federal level, because the federal government, of course, they, through federal legislation, determine how something should be reported. I do know, of course, as we know, with mortgages and rent for commercial businesses, there's already information out there that it should not be reported to the credit reporting agencies, no late fees, things of that nature. But to the extent we can notate that this is a COVID-19 summary ejectment or eviction, that's something we can definitely discuss, and I am notating that, and we can discuss that, and hopefully you'll be a part of that discussion at our next Civil Courts Committee. I don't know what effect, if any, it will have, but we can definitely have that discussion at our next meeting.
Thank you.
I think that was a very good question, and something that we can even maybe bubble up also to Congresswoman Adams to ask for some assistance with that as well. Any other questions?
Yes, we have one from Deronda Metz.
Welcome, Deronda.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for such good information. I'm on a lot of those prevention calls, and I have to say that sometimes it's conflicting information, right? Because I know we were given some information that a person could be in a room one night and actually got tenants' rights. So I'm sure that it probably was said, but I was just trying to get an understanding. Is there a length of time when this order will be up and people in the hotels will have to leave? Is there a date already established for that?
The Chief Justice order expires, or we will resume normal operations June the 1st, which means that at that time our civil court sessions will resume, albeit we're not sure what that structure will look like, but we will be issuing orders once that week of June the 1st. So June the 1st, I would say, or May 31st.
Yeah.
Because the Attorney General's opinion, I believe, states that there needs to be a court order signed by a judge. And at that point, we will be issuing orders and signing orders for summary ejectment June the 1st, the week of June the 1st.
And that would definitely include those guests that are in the hotels as well.
It may or may not. Once again, that's the situation, and that's where the police department comes into play, as well as the sheriff's department, because they may be saying, I'm a tenant, I've been here now for, over 30 days, and so this is the only place I have, so I'm a tenant. So the question then becomes whether or not the hotel owner, whether or not they will need to file summary ejectment proceedings, or if they're going to call the police and say this person is trespassing, please remove them from the property. We have no way of knowing what the police will do in that situation right now because there is currently a state stay-at-home order. My understanding with the Days Inn situation is that the police were sort of being called out, but they were not necessarily removing people. Generally, what will happen is, from my experience, and I'll let the Attorney General and Judge Trosh can chime in, or any of you, I have not seen the police get involved in civil matters. This is a civil matter. It's not a criminal matter. If they charge them with trespass, they may choose to actually arrest them, but that is totally within the discretion of that particular officer. They may give them a citation. It's totally up to that particular police officer whether or not they're going to actually arrest the person for trespassing or give them a citation and move on, because they may not want to get involved since it's considered a civil matter. So I just don't know. We just don't know how it's going to pan out.
Thank you.
Any other questions before I thank our guests for their participation? Last question.
We have 3 questions.
Okay.
So Lee Cochran, then Mr. Winston, then Ms. Johnson.
Okay.
I'll try to go really fast. Do we have any sense of the numbers you gave us of kind of evictions that as of June 1st, you could start processing new evictions essentially? How many of them are based on non-payment of rent versus other issues? I asked that kind of to throw to the group in the sense of if there is, by the time we get to June 1st, if there are programs, my follow-up question actually is are those cases still at a point where if a tenant were to make their rent current, that would avoid the summary ejectment? And I say that in the sense of if by June 1st, there was a certain number of folks that have been identified that are essentially subject to eviction for non-payment, but there was a way to make their payment current, could they effectively stay where they are?
Currently, the numbers that I was provided, Mr. Cochran, they do not reflect how many of those summary ejectments or evictions were filed due to non-payment of rent. So I'm not sure that I can answer those questions. I don't even believe that the clerk's office or trial court administrator's office actually keeps that data. I can inquire to find out as far as whether or not the tenant can actually pay their rent in order to remain in the property. That is always an option. But it's also an option of that particular landlord to actually refuse the rent. The landlord does not have to refuse the rent if they believe that tenant, or if they want that tenant removed. Because let's say there was that same tenant before they filed the eviction with the 133 that are backlogged that will come before district court judges, not the magistrate issues, but before district court judges. Out of that 133, how many of those tenants did the landlord file summary ejectment due to non-payment, but because they had been late, let's say 8 out of the last 9 months with their rental payment, they had to send demand letters and assess late fees every single month. They may ultimately just want that tenant to be removed, so they do not have to accept the rent. If the landlord does accept the rent, then basically that sort of starts the clock all over again, and so the landlord will have to go through the proceeding of summary ejectment, sending the demand letter, filing the complaint all over again. So that is a possibility if the landlord will accept the rent. And that's where we did talk about reviving our voluntary dispute resolution, and we'll be having that discussion at our next meeting to try and resolve a lot of these cases. That was a program that we used to have that the State Bar, from my understanding, is trying to revive. There's still no phone number. They're trying to create a dispute resolution hotline phone number. I was told I could tell you all that they're in the process of developing that option to help alleviate the backlog, and that's throughout the state. But they do not have a number yet, and they are still in the process of developing that option and or opportunity.
And I would just add that, while we don't know what percentage of those pending cases are for non-payment of rent, generally speaking, that is the primary breach that is alleged in the summary judgment complaints, and to the extent that dispute resolution practices can become available to deal with some of the backlog, and existing rental assistance funds could be leveraged to assist, even a category of tenants who can reach an agreement with their landlord to remain in the property if they can pay a balance. I think that it's worth bringing some of those ideas and those resources to the table as we try to think about how to deal with this backlog of cases, and frankly preventing folks from becoming homeless where existing resources can support that.
Mr. Winston.
Thank you. So we all know that laws and the law and government don't traditionally operate simply by using common sense. But it's become pretty clear that for a pandemic and to get through it, rely on science as well as common sense. And so we really need it to prevail here. You all have presented about laws that have been written not really considering being in an extended pandemic. So when we tell people that the primary prescription for surviving this pandemic is to stay in a home, it is common sense to understand that someone who doesn't have a traditional home would consider a hotel home, even if they have only been there for 1 or 2 nights. We also have business owners who are keenly aware of the law and how to work around it and manipulate it. And they have access to counsel. So they move goalposts, doing things like making people check out and check back in at certain very inconvenient times of the day, changing keys or simply closing down their businesses to avoid the legal processes of eviction outright. How do we common sensibly apply the law in a common sense approach to public health and safety? How do we change our legal approach to the pandemic besides simply shutting down courts until the inevitable normal proceedings and judgments resume?
Well, for me, this is Judge Beth again. For me, I think that goes to, because we do have so much discretion, all we can do is tell you what the law is, what the law states. We're bound by that. But that's where figuring out and actually determining and voting for your judges comes into play. That's where your lawyers, your advocates, your legal aid attorneys, your advocates, your housing advocates come into play, presenting those arguments to the judge and ultimately allowing that judge to make the determination. I don't think that, as you stated, the law doesn't take into account one's personal experiences. It's not supposed to be partial. It's supposed to be impartial / unbiased. But there has to be, like you said, some degree of common sense applied to the facts. And I think in this particular case, to answer your question, I don't know that there is an answer to your question, except that that's where determining who your judges are comes into play, and whether or not they're understanding the realities during this pandemic. And how are the judges going to find? Are the judges who are going to be hearing these cases ultimately going to be determining, well, no, they were a tenant and you're going to have to evict them? I can't tell you that, because I can't tell you how any of my colleagues would find. I can't tell you what I would do, because that would be improper and unethical for any judge to tell you how they will rule in any particular situation. So I wish I could give you more, but unfortunately, I can't answer that question. I would just suggest that, everyone keep their eyes open, and we can have some of those discussions during our meeting, but keeping in mind that, every judge is considered an independent judicial official. So, for example, we don't have supervisors. We are beholden to you, the public, because you constitutionally are allowed to vote for your judges. So that's who we answer to, is we answer to the public. Now, we have our schedules, we have our administrative duties. Our chief tells us where to be and what courtroom to go into. And she, will represent us at different meetings, and that's what she's supposed to do. We can come to a consensus. If we all agree, then we all agree on a certain policy or procedure. But when it comes to the law, that's up to every single judge independently to use their own independent judicial discretion. So I'm sorry I can't give you more, but we can have those discussions, and maybe we can. That's where the advocates come in. I'll just say that.
I'd love if we can be made aware of those work meetings that Judge Best referred to. I would love to attend those if possible.
I will specifically. We already have a date identified. I will send that information to. If I send that to, who should I send the information to regarding that next date for it to be disseminated to?
Just send it to me, Judge Best, and I'll make sure that the task force member gets it.
Okay, I will send that information. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Johnson, our final question.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. This was a lot of information presented tonight. This is a huge issue in our community, which is why I've been so vocal about it the last 6 weeks or so. Is it possible to come back together maybe with the same parties next week to discuss solutions? I don't know what the agenda is, but I think we need some time to process this. We're going to hear from some hotel owners. If I had to ask a specific question, I know that there are hotel owners watching. If the Attorney General office maybe has recommendations for those hotel owners who do have individuals who might be considered legal residents, and we know that there are hotels out there that have not been paid in over a month. I've received emails personally from a hotel that's owed hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I don't know what we tell these hotel owners because they're being villainized, but they're not being paid, and they have staff. And if they're not paid and they're forced to close, we're going to have people out in the street. So I don't know if there's a solution for that. Also, if they're evicted, we know that we have at least 200 new filings in the community that are waiting to be processed. There's going to be so many more. This is a lose-lose situation when hotels are not being paid. If initially, as you heard Mr. Trotman say, it was a part of the COVID plan. So if we could reintroduce this to the COVID plan, I don't know how this is done, but this is a problem. This is a crisis. So I don't think we can discuss solutions next week. I think we are the task force that's charged with this. But this is a lose-lose situation in our community. We have to do something. That's all.
Thank you. I understand the question. I think we're going to make a hard pivot next week. The rationale, and let me first by thanking our speakers, Daniel, Judge Best, Judge Trotman, for their excellent presentation and giving us the information I think is necessary to move the community forward, to educate the community, and talk about what the law is today, obviously, as we work through this COVID-19 crisis. So thank you very much for your presentations and responding to my phone call and being a guest this afternoon. Ms. Johnson, one of the reasons why we brought the county here today was to outline specifically their role, their responsibility relating to the homelessness issue in our community and issues dealing with hotel evictions, etc. Anthony has left the call, but he indicated that if there are any follow-up questions relating to any of the above topics, that he is more than willing to entertain them and help us troubleshoot those issues. And so the appropriate body to really drill down to help identify community solutions really rests with Mecklenburg County and their response to COVID-19, with the city playing a supportive role. And I'm not sure that should change, move forward. And that was one of the reasons why we brought Anthony here today, why we brought the judges and the Deputy Attorney General here today to kind of frame the issue for the community, to find out how we can play a supportive role with the county. And so I would love to open it up for comments in reference to that, but I think our objective is to, one, have the task force members review the outline that we distributed in your package for comments and critique, and then next week really begin to start addressing the issues in our 30-day outline once we get your feedback and your amendments to it. And so I think that may be a good point to start in terms of, one, that in your package, we sent everyone a copy of the 30-day outline. If Ms. Wyman can give us just a brief 30-second commercial in terms of what's in it. And I think what we would like you to do is to take a look at it over the weekend and give us feedback so we can go ahead and bring it to you at our next meeting for an adoption. And so Ms. Wyman, if you can give 30 seconds, a minute, just to kind of outline what you presented to us, and then we'll take it home as homework and provide our edits over the weekend for an adoption on next week. Ms. Wyman.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Graham, and other council members and task force members. Quickly, what you have is a work plan that was developed basically based on what we heard in the original task force, in the first task force meeting, about the things that you thought we need to work on. It is categorized into several sections. I won't spend time on the details of the section, but basically there's a general section, there is a financial assistance section, there's an eviction section, which was covered today. There's a marketing and communication section. There is a section that deals with increasing the supply of affordable housing. There's a regulatory and a legislative tools section. And then finally, there's a homelessness and supportive services section. And within each section, there are tasks or activities based on your specific comments at the first meeting. As Mr. Graham has said, it is a draft. If you all would just continue to look at it, get back any comments to me, we will incorporate those in. And let me just thank a few of you who have provided some comments so far, and I received those, and we'll begin to populate the table with those comments. Thank you so much, Mr. Graham.
Thank you, Ms. Wyman. Any final thoughts from the committee members before we officially adjourn? Any final thoughts?
Yes, this is Councilmember Winston. I actually read that work plan, not necessarily as a draft, but as Ms. Wyman said, this was what we all discussed last week. And I think there's much more stuff in here that can be done in 30 days, but I would like us to start doing the work. I would like to see a 30-day work plan, I think, to review and update that housing framework. And specifically around some of the things that we talked about today around homelessness. I said the two things that I would like to see us work on from that perspective. While today was a great informational part, I definitely was hoping to provide a pathway to action by the end of today's meeting.
Okay, any additional comments? Okay, we are scheduled to convene again next Thursday, same time. Staff will send out the meeting agendas and our sign-in information. We ask you to provide your edits to the 30-day action plan We would like to get that sooner than later so we can kind of complete the final document for your consideration next week. And I want to thank everyone again for participation. I know today was a lot of information, but it sets the groundwork for moving forward.
I'm not totally clear on the workflow from here. So basically, we're going to come back next week to adopt the work plan that has been given to us. And what is happening between now and then? Just reading the document that we've already been sent?
We're asking all the task force members to provide their comments to it. Some have, others have not. So we want those full comments, and once we get it, we'll bring it to the committee. That'll be the first thing that we discuss on next week for a formal adoption of it from all the members, so we can feel that we own it, and then we'll move forward from there. All right. Any last comments? Thanks everyone for coming, and thanks for your participation. Meeting is adjourned.